Okay, so it's time for medieval fantasy fights. Let me ask you, who would win from Game of Thrones' Dario Naharis and from a King Arthur legend, Percival? So Percival, specifically the one from the Merlin TV show. Don't know, you'll find out if you watch this film. So I'm talking about Northmen, a Viking saga. Now this was actually an independently produced movie that I believe it was partially at least funded by Kickstarter. And it really tells a tale of a group of sort of Vikings that are kind of washed ashore on the Scottish coast, and they're led by Tom Hopper's Abjorn, I think his name is, and he's this kind of like rock star looking Northman Viking, and basically he's got this disgraced band of Viking warriors that have basically on the run from their own people, and they kind of accidentally end up in this sort of Scottish coast, and now they happen upon this kind of Scottish princess who was on her way to get married, and they kind of obviously kill all the kind of guards, and they decide initially they want to kind of capture her and ransom her off, but the king decides he may have political reasons for not maybe going through with that, and he has this kind of band of mercenaries led by Ed Skirrin's kind of commander, and he is played Dario Naharis in the Game of Thrones. He was later recast, but you know, he's the original Dario Naharis, and that's why I say there's that fantasy battle coming up. And essentially this is a tale of these kind of Vikings going across the Scottish countryside in a bid to try and get to freedom, and of course the princess obviously learns that there's kind of maybe things aren't quite as rosy at home as she first thought, and kind of bonds with the Vikings, and they sort of happen across a Christian monk played by True Blood's Ryan Catane. I'm probably not pronouncing these names right, by the way, but whatever. Anyway, and he's just kind of like, almost like a kung fu monk, but he's Christian. Don't ask me. This movie doesn't go for historical accuracy. It really is just kind of a chase tale across this kind of countryside with this kind of band of mercenaries with their kind of cool but not historically accurate looking armour. And that's pretty much the movie. So, downsides first. Let's talk about the negatives first, because this has kind of been weighing on my mind a little bit. So, the main issues for me come with the actual script, unfortunately, because I think that's the weakest part of this film. Because there's not a lot of story. It is really just essentially a kind of chase film across this kind of like woodland area, that's kind of, you know, and marshlands, things like that. Without sort of any real sort of twists and turns, to be honest. It's all very sort of predictable and fairly sort of pedestrian. But the worst crime for me is that there's virtually no characterization in this movie whatsoever. So we already start with these kind of Vikings in the middle of the action, in the middle of this storm. We don't get to know any of the characters really, and we kind of, apart from the kind of the main guy played by Tom Hopper, who played Percival in the British Merlin TV show. And we only kind of get to know him because he's the kind of the leader really, and he gets kind of the most screen time. And there's another one who's maybe his rival. But the rest of them, we have literally no idea really what their names are. They kind of don't get any real characterization at all, to be quite honest. One's an archer, but you don't really know anything about them. So you can't really care about them. And in a way, the bad guy is kind of group of mercenaries, and the head guy is played by, I think the name's Ed Skirrin. And he's the guy who played Dario Naharis in Game of Thrones, the first version of him anyway. And he gets a little bit more sort of characterization, you know, just as much as the kind of the main good guy, if you like. So, but none of the other good guys really get anything, to be fair. So there's very little characterization here, so you can't really get in behind these characters because you really don't care about them all that much, because you're just not invested in their sort of personalities or in their sort of characters. And that I put down to the script. There's also a lot of times where I found myself sort of slapping myself in the head, because there's so many times in this film where people stand around when they could just kill their opponent, and the good guys do it and the bad guys do it. It's just for dramatic effect, and to give this other guy like a respite so he can kind of get up and fight again. They don't kill him, they just sort of stand around in the gloat, or just kind of like look at them for some reason, and it happens like 3 or 4 times in this movie, and it's very frustrating. Maybe I can get away with it once, but it just annoyed me, because it just, you know, it was kind of so unrealistic, and so like in battle you would just take the opportunity and go for it. The other thing I would say as well is the way the main sort of protagonist, the hero character, Abjorn, I think his name is, played by Tom Hopper. He's very kind of reactionary. And not at all really proactive, to be quite honest. And again, it makes him kind of almost like a weaker character than maybe he should be. The design choices as well, like I said, this doesn't go for historical accuracy at all, rather than kind of a more of a fantasy look. All the kind of the bad guys have got this kind of black armor with skulls on the back of their helmets and things like that. You know, and the kind of the Tom Hubbard's character's got his guns out and all of that. So it is really going for sort of style over substance in regards to the look of it. So that said, what did I like about this film? This has a kind of almost a very light supernatural tone. So it comes across more as a fantasy film than a kind of historical film. And it's a kind of just as an action pace, it's pretty enjoyable. I actually think it's relatively well directed. The problems to me don't stem from the direction, they don't really stem from the acting. Although, like I said, the characters aren't really fleshed out. But to be fair, I blame the script more than the acting for that, to be honest. So the acting for me is all passable. Don't really have any sort of problems with the acting. I think there's some miscasting here, if I'm honest. I won't go into too much detail about it, but there are some miscasting. But the acting isn't so bad. The action scenes are all quite well shot. I think the choreography is very good. You know, it's a good looking film. Like I said, it does go for the kind of the style over substance. We have a kind of almost like a kung fu Christian monk, whatever. So, you know, there is some good action here. It is fairly violent. There are some good effects in regards to sort of prosthetic limbs and head skin sort of chopped off and things like that. And it's suitably sort of grubby looking. But because it's maybe the script wasn't as sharp as it could have been, it kind of just knocked it down a little bit. It just kind of makes it a dumber film than really it could have been, unfortunately. It just comes across as a bit of a, you know, a B-movie kind of fun but a time-wasting film. And the other thing I felt, considering it's called Northmen, we didn't really see much in the way of the kind of the sea and that sort of thing, and the kind of the that's what really makes the kind of this kind of like Viking mythology and kind of historical things that we have seen in shows like TV's Viking. And really, this 99% of this film is just tromping across the Scottish or whatever, however it's meant to be Scotland, but wherever they shot it, it's meant to be the Scottish Highlands or some kind of woodland area, and that's pretty much all you're going to see. I mean, it looks great, but like I said, considering it's all Northmen, I would have maybe liked to see a little bit more, you know, at their homeland and that sort of thing, or maybe a little bit more on the sea, that kind of stuff. But you know, I quite enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. It does have some problems. They all kind of stem from the script, to be fair. But I think the acting was all fair. There wasn't, you know, it's not brilliant acting, but there's no really turgid performances here at all. They all do a passable job with what they've got. It's a fun film. If you like your action, sort of medieval action films, fantasy films, you'll like this movie. I pretty much guarantee you that. It kind of reminded me a little bit about Hammer of the Gods, which is the 2013 movie. It does have some kind of similarities to that. So if you have seen that film and you liked it, you're going to like this. Although I think this film is probably a little bit better. I'm going to score this one a 6.5 out of 10. What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.